Remember the Maine.
You always
Sorry.
remember the Maine.
I'll explain that later.
Yeah, we'll hear more about that later. Welcome to the Third Party Conversation. I'm Jason.
And I'm TC.
Our battered.
He's back to
Sign here.
begging. I feel like we're on NPR.
We're thinking about getting a whiteboard so we can write all kinds of stuff on there.
Like,
Anyway,
remember the Maine.
Like, remember that. Subscribe, comment, like, keep up with the shorts. Those are fun. We use those for griping.
And other pointed stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And anyway, do those things, please. And most importantly, share this with somebody younger than us because it is their future rights that we're trying to secure. Okay. Last week, we talked about the freaking media. We talked about how important the freedom of the press, freedom of speech, the media, those things are adjacent to one another.
To being a check on government.
Check on government and a source of information for the public, educating the public, keeping us informed of.
Because a democracy requires an informed electorate.
Absolutely. And we talked about what a cornerstone it is of our freedom. We talked about how the information is always presented through a lens. That's always happened. Technology has always evolved. Everything from bold print to the phonograph to the radio to television and beyond. And at the end of the week, we started talking about the fairness doctrine. And it's probably the thing I think that's most quintessential or centrally located to the issue. I'm not sure, but I think it's pretty important.
It's important.
Yeah. And if you don't know what the fairness doctrine is, it's essentially was a law that was put into place in
1930s.
Yeah, in the 1930s, or the legislation started there. And it was basically to generate a way for both sides of any issue that gets presented to be presented fairly
to keep
to the
the
public.
consumers, the public, informed of what was going on.
Think about the times, the 30s. You know, radio comes along, gets invented in the late 1890s, starts to gain prominence in the early 1900s. And by the 1930s, radio is as American as apple pie. I mean, it's, you eat dinner, you sit down and you listen to a radio program. And it was a technology, one of the things we said last week is a lot of these technologies get thrust upon us. And though we enjoy them, there's usually very little regulation, especially in the beginning. And I think that
And the Federal Communications Commission was created to regulate it.
And think about what's going on too. Mid-30s, all right? We're post-World War I. There's already some stuff kind of going on in Germany. There's definitely rhetoric going on the radio.
Especially here in the United States. Father John Conklin out of Detroit, a Catholic priest, was pro-Nazi, anti-Jew, and he has been considered the father of hate speech. And Charles Lindbergh, all of us think Charles Lindbergh was this great guy, but there was this period in there where he was pro-Nazi and he was out speaking against basically the American democracy.
Henry Ford, who I love, was
anti-Jewish. Oh my
God. So anyway, all of this is going on. This technology is become prominent across the country, and regulation is necessary. And the fairness doctrine, the legislation for it begins in the 1930s. It doesn't get officially adopted in full by the FCC until 1949. But think about this. All through the 50s, all through the 60s, all through the 70s, and most of the 80s, the fairness doctrine is in place. And we're definitely old enough to remember newscasts where if an issue was going to be presented, a controversial issue was going to be presented, you were going to show both sides.
Yeah.
And the thing is it was still pretty loose, I thought, because it didn't even require equal time for both sides of the issue. It just required that both sides be presented.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I keep calling myself a Reagan Republican, and there's so many things that he screwed up. One of which, he's allowed the Fairness Doctrine to go away in 1989.
Yeah. I have mixed issues about it, but about it going away, I'm on the fence about it, especially given modern technology. But at any rate, it goes away, and I think when it goes away is probably pretty critical. We're right at that time when cable news, the
Cable
87.
news
This is 1987.
Mm-hmm.
So cable news.
Well, back it up and give you a little bit of history. When the FCC got in place, they told the major networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, that they could use the airwaves for free as long as they provided an hour of news per day. What they did not say is you can't make any money or do any advertising during that period. But they still had the Fairness Doctrine in play, and they had to present both sides of an issue.
So, 87, cable news is getting big. The Fairness Doctrine goes away, and all of a sudden, you have this open door for opinion news, for it just to be.
And you could read, just like any of the old newspapers. There used to be 2 newspapers in each town, in each city. One was conservative, one was liberal. They all agreed on the facts, but they had different opinions about what those facts meant. And an educated population at that point actually got both of those newspapers, and they could read the opinion page on both of those newspapers and form their own opinions on what was going on. And then when we end up with the Fairness Doctrine going away, radio guys did the same thing, presented both sides. Television guys did the same thing. And then when cable news comes along and there's just this flood of information technology shoving this stuff in our faces, and they came along and said, what are the pros and cons there for the 80s?
Well, here's what we're gonna. There's a mosquito flying around
yes,
here.
There
y'all.
is.
Sorry.
It's kind of annoying.
Anyway,
one of these days we'll catch it.
We talk about technology getting thrust upon us, and this is one of those things. This is an AI overview of the pros and cons for the implementation of the Fairness Doctrine and its removal. So we'll just go through this right quick because it's kind of interesting, and I would encourage anybody to use either the AI overview with Google or download ChatGPT, the free version, and use it because it's quite interesting. So, implementation in the 1930s. Obviously, this is the Democrats for the implementation because this is FDR. So, arguments for: ensured diverse viewpoints on public airwaves. Protected against monopolization of media voices. Strengthened democratic discourse by requiring balanced coverage. And it reflected the scarcity of broadcast spectrum, treating it as a public good. So those are all the arguments for. That's what the Democrats in the 1930s were arguing for the Fairness Doctrine. And they were the ones that implemented it. You want to read the
Sure, I'll go
nays?
The nays.
This is in the 1930s.
They burdened the broadcasters with compliance requirements. the potential chilling effect of controversial speech, government intrusion into editorial decisions, and created ambiguity. Thank you. Created ambiguity in defining what constituted fair or balanced.
Interesting. Do you feel like it did that?
No.
Those were the arguments
It's
against.
just that you got to have fair and balanced. Okay, what are the definitions? It's the same thing we deal with any poorly written regulation. It gives you a word, like, okay, what does that word mean?
Yeah.
Like Bill Clinton saying, how do you define sex?
Yeah. So in the late 80s, this would be the Reagan administration wanting to remove the law, the Fairness Doctrine. So the arguments for removal, this would be the Republicans. Growth of cable and new media reduced the scarcity concerns. Protects First Amendment rights of broadcasters from government oversight. Encourages free market competition to provide diversity of viewpoints. Eliminated the chilling effect on broadcasters who avoided controversial issues. Those were the Republican arguments to remove the doctrine. And here were the Democratic Party arguments for keeping it in place.
It risked consolidation of media ownership, reducing diversity of viewpoints. That happened. Just take a look at Murdoch or Sinclair or any of those media conglomerates.
The echo chamber that we were talking about.
It increased the potential for partisan bias in coverage. That happened. Reduced the obligation of broadcasters to serve the public interest. Yeah, that happened too. And it weakened mechanisms ensuring a balanced political discourse. And I'm going to say that happened too. What do you think?
I do think that all of those happened. I think why they happened is critical. And we have said many times on this channel that we have dropped the ball. Mm-hmm. We, as citizens, have dropped the ball with respect to our government. We definitely have fallen into these echo chamber situations. Now, by the way, let me say, there are some news organizations out there that continue to try to follow the Fairness Doctrine. Think, shows like 60 Minutes or CBS Sunday Morning on the networks. For a lot of years, there were journalists that tried, if they were going to present a controversial issue, they tried to at least present both sides.
All of this is profit driven.
Certainly.
And we, the people who are consuming this media, are paying for it, usually in our time watching some stupid commercial for Viagra or Cialis or whatever. It depends on the time of day that you're watching.
As cable news grows and becomes more sophisticated, and as, TC mentioned earlier that one of the things they didn't regulate was the fact that they could make money on it. So as they continued to present the news and wanting it to rate better and better because they were offering expensive primetime air
to the ad
companies, they started to inject something into the news that I know a little bit about, and that's drama. They started to...
Which brings us to Remember the Maine.
You wanted to go through that? Yeah.
We, the people, have been manipulated via our media, whether it was newspapers or the radio or television, for the entirety of our existence. In 1898, there was an explosion on an American naval vessel in Havana Harbor, and it sank quickly, killed a bunch of the sailors on board. Nobody knew what happened, but the newspapers, this would be Pulitzer Prize guy, and William Randolph Hearst, the Hearst Castle guy, manipulated our emotions with slogans like "Remember the Maine," and they ratcheted up the American reaction to this so that we ended up declaring war on Spain because everybody thought that the Spanish had blown up the Maine. Well, no, Maine was not blown up by the Spanish. It was an internal explosion, as we have found out during the 1980s. And yet, we ended up with going to war with the Spain. We ended up occupying the Philippines. Teddy Roosevelt went to Cuba and the Rough Riders and charged San Juan Hill. And oh, by the way, that painting that shows everybody on horses, no, Teddy's the only guy that had a horse. Everybody else ran up that hill. So they manipulate our emotions. We end up with Father John Conklin in the 1930s ratcheting up our emotions. We got speeches by all these Nazi sympathizers in the United States.
The fairness doctrine hits, and remember Walter Cronkite news.
Mm-hmm.
You know, very based level, very objective, very serious, a large inflection, a dramatic inflection for Walter Cronkite might have been taking off his glasses and laying them on the table.
You knew he was going to tell you something important.
Yeah. Now, contrast that with today. If you're watching left-wing programs, you might get the news presented with a cynical laugh or a ha-ha, who would have thunk? Or if you're watching something more right-wing, it might be a furrowed brow of, we're just asking questions here. All of this drama gets injected into the news for a reason. And it's to make it rate.
It's to make you sit there and watch the commercial.
For sure. So now we're in this world continuing to have technology thrust upon us. What happens after cable news? The late 90s, early 2000s, the internet comes along and innovates the way we do all kinds of things. Social media and the smartphone comes along and connects us in all kinds of new ways. And it just becomes this massive, swirling pond of evil goo that
you can watch while sitting on the toilet.
And what do we do? What do we do about it, folks?
And you got people still manipulating your emotions for clicks, which gives them advertising dollars. Breaking news. Oh, Trump does a fatal mistake. Well, okay, how many fatal mistakes can somebody make?
Everything is breaking. Yeah. Everything is crash and burn. Everything is, urgent.
It's like, you get so sick of the channel that you thought was straight and level. You realize that you're just being manipulated by, because it's, okay, what's the next drama? What
can we do? What can we do? Because I don't know that
I don't know the answer what we can do other than turn it off.
Here's what I would say. We have been the ones who've dropped the ball on staying informed and allowing the government to take the incremental steps that have gotten us here. We really need to pick the ball back up. And this falls under, in the 5 pillars of strength, this falls directly under the purview of personal willingness to defend your personal sovereignty. Turn it off is a good thing. Also, force yourself to listen to media outside of your bubble. I do it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an American media. One of the things I like to do is listen to issues being presented by foreign news.
Reuters.
They have a perspective. I like to listen. BBC. I like to listen to The Rest is Politics.
What's that German one? Deutsch?
UK.
Deutsch something.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I like The Rest is Politics UK. They, you and I talk about the term Sonder, while which, if you're not familiar, basically what it means is while you're managing through your very complicated life full of all kinds of complicated decisions, so is everybody else. And having
it's the
their experiences,
realization that everybody else's life is just as shitty as yours.
yeah. So Europe has people that present the news that used to be involved in parliament and are their military and whatever, and now they're news presenters, and just like we do, and they have a perspective. It's interesting to hear what their perspective of our issues are.
But it goes back to the lack of journalism.
For sure.
Journalism is not dead.
No, it's
unless
not.
we allow it to be. But most of these shows that we end up watching in the evening are not news programs. They may be under the guise of Fox News or under MSNBC or CNN, but they're all opinion hosts. And none of them that I'm aware of have any kind of journalism background. You've got people that were spokespersons for the White House, or they are lawyers that moved up through the system, or Walter Cronkite was a war correspondent. He was actually out there finding the news. So was Mike Wallace. And
I think there's some good stuff going on out there in independent media. There is some independent media that is working without any corporate. They're not doing any ad reads. They're not doing any corporate stuff. They do present opposing opinions. Breaking Points comes to mind. That's a good one you can look up. There's a company out there. This is a paid service, but it's called Ground News. And it gives you a lot of the background of who's presenting what issue and how they're presenting it and where their backing comes from. That's some interesting research that you can do.
It's kind of like research.
It is. And I have to say that I have a lot of faith in what's coming with technology. I'm encouraged by the positive things that AI can do for us. That's one of the reasons that we did this, was to show you that it is possible to do research to show both sides. You can research, hey, what was both sides of the argument when this happened? What's both sides of the argument right now on any given issue? Technology is being developed right now that's going to help us pick that ball back up and try and inform ourselves in the best way that we can, so that we can decide which side of the issue we're on instead of what side of the aisle we're on. And I think that is an important thing for us to do.
I think there's, as a last item, we have some of these people on the media that are screaming at the top of their lungs how they hate the other people. They despise them. They find them disgusting, and they're trying to manipulate it again. But ask the question, okay, so what do you want to do about it?
Yeah, to what end?
Are you going to bring up firearms and go and shoot those people?
Yeah.
Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to go to civil war in order to stop people from spewing their hatred? Which brings us to, you got to allow all thoughts to be aired.
You really do.
Because if you don't, they're just going to fester. So we ended up with the thought police of the last 20 years and saying, you can't ask like that. You can't say that word. You can't do this. You can't.
We denounce this speech or this, whatever.
And while we can say that the Democrats want to get rid of your words, we've got other ones that are using those words to manipulate you. And you just got to, you don't agree with it. You don't have to listen to it, but you got to let what was you saying earlier today about people should be able to gather together in a group of people that they feel comfortable with?
Yes, I am all for people creating a community around them that makes them feel safe, makes them feel heard, makes them feel like they can move forward in life and develop their life and their career in the way they want to. I'm for everybody being able to do that. I'm not for anybody usurping authority at the federal level and forcing everyone else to think or behave the way you do. That I am not.
That's tyranny.
For. That's tyranny, and I'm not for that. And I don't know what all the solutions are, but I do believe that having more seats at the table is valuable. I do believe that busting up the duopoly of the two-party system and allowing more seats at the table is valuable in serving we the American people in all kinds of ways. I'm excited about what technology has to offer. We have to stay informed. We can't allow things to fester in darkness, because what ends up happening is issues that you think you're done with you end up finding out 20 years later you're not so done with those issues. At least knowing who, at least knowing who and where those people are allows you to manage it the way you want to manage it without giving up freedoms in order to manage it a different way. A way that the framers weren't really into, and I don't know, I'm not really either. So next week, I'm not sure yet. If we come up with more media stuff, we'll talk about that. But I think at some point, if not next week, then the week after, we're going to be moving on to capitalism. And that is going to be interesting.
Especially trying to, people like, I'm capitalism. I'm for, that's not we're a democracy. We just happen to have a capitalist economy.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please share, and we'll catch you next week.
Thank you.